Welcome to Counters. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at the compound annual growth rate, otherwise known as the CAGR. We're going to look at what it is, explain why we calculate it, and of course go through some examples in calculating the CAGR using the formula. We're also going to look at how to calculate the same examples using Excel, and finally show the advantages and the disadvantages of the compound annual growth rate. Now, if you'd like to see how to calculate the CAGR using various financial calculators, we have done so in the links in the description below, so you can check that one out. But here we explain the concept behind the CAGR. So what is it? Well, compound annual growth rate is defined as the rate at which an investment would have grown if it had grown at a steady rate, compounded annually over a specified period. Now, usually we'll do this using revenue, where you have revenue for a number of years and you're saying if my revenue has grown from a specific amount to a specific amount. So let's say the revenue in year 1 or year 0 was 100 Rand for the period, and then the revenue in period 5 was 300 Rand. Then the question is, what is the average growth rate on an annual basis? Well, that is what the compound annual growth rate looks at. And you'll understand it much better as we look at the calculations, both using the formula and Excel. The metric is commonly used in finance and business to compare the growth of different investments or to assess the performance of a company over multiple years. So if you're going to have two different institutions or two different departments and you want to see what is the growth of the company in terms of the revenues they're making, for instance, then this is the one to use, the compound annual growth rate. The metric assumes that profits are reinvested at the end of each period. And that is where the compounding comes in, where you're assuming that it's reinvested together with the growth of the previous year for the duration of the periods. Okay, so if you're looking at it for 5 years, then we're assuming that the profits are reinvested every year for the 5 years. But you'll understand more as we'll be looking at the example here. So basically, all that to say is that if you're looking at the revenue which has grown from a specific amount to a specific amount, as I've just explained previously, then you're saying, what is the average growth rate? How is it growing? How is my revenue growing on a year by year basis? And so remember, this is going to be an average here, and you will see that being one of the weaknesses, assuming that it's growing at a steady rate every year. Okay, so what is the formula for calculating the compound annual growth rate? Well, the formula is quite simple. So here's the formula. CAGR is calculated as the ending value, meaning the last value for the final year, otherwise known as the future value, divided by the starting value or the present value, the first value that you're looking at. So if you're looking at it from year 0 to year 5, then year 0 would be your starting value, and then year 5 value would be your ending value. And then we raise that to the power of 1 divided by the number of periods. So if you're looking at 5 years, for instance, you will take 1 divided by 5, and that's what you'd raise the answer here in brackets by. And then once you've gotten the answer here in the black brackets, then you can deduct 1 and you will have your compound annual growth rate. I hope that has made sense. I hope it's easy enough, but it should be as we look at this example. So you want to pay attention to the brackets here. Remember, you start by calculating, you can see the orange brackets, you start by calculating that ending value divided by starting value. And then once you have that answer, you raise it to the power of 1 divided by number of periods. Remember, it has to be in brackets. And then once you've got the answer for the whole thing, you just deduct 1 and you've got your CAGR. So let's look at some examples in calculating the CAGR. Here's the first one. We're told that Steve has an investment that is worth 1,000 Rand at the beginning of the period and grew to 1,800 Rand over 5 years. What is the compound annual growth rate? So we're going to use this formula to calculate this. But even before I bring up the formula, you can see here what is your present value and what is your future value. Well, Steve has an investment that is worth 1,000 Rand at the beginning of the period. So of course that's going to be my present value or beginning value, and grew to 1,800 over 5 years. So that's going to be my future value or ending value. Okay, and then what is the compound annual growth rate? So obviously when we raise it to the power of 1, we divide it by the number of periods. Here in this case it's 5 years, and you're noticing we're using the word periods and not years. That's because sometimes you'll be given months to work with, maybe 5 months or 6 months, then you know those are your 6 periods. So periods, maybe years, maybe months, maybe quarters in a year, maybe number of quarters in a number of years. So whatever those periods are, then you'll just have to take them into account and count how many periods you're actually dealing with. But in most cases, we'll be dealing with the number of years. So what's the solution for this one here? Let's bring up our formula once again. Our ending value, as we've just explained, is the 1,800 Rand, because that is the last value, the value at year 5, okay? And our starting value, of course, it's at the beginning of the period. So we've got here 1,000 Rand. So our starting value is 1,000 Rand. So we're going to take ending value 1,800 divided by 1,000 Rand. And then, of course, that answer, we raise it to the power of 1 divided by the number of periods. As we've just explained, it's 5 years. And then once we've gotten the answer in the black brackets, we're going to deduct 1 and we will have our answer. So here's how it's going to look like: 1,800 divided by 1,000 Rand, raised to the power of 1 divided by 5, and then that answer we deduct 1 and we get 12.47%. Quite easy to do, quite easy to calculate. So on average, what we are saying here is that this investment is growing by 12.47%. So remember, at the beginning, present value, you've got 1,000 Rand, and by the end of the first year, it would have gained 12.47%. So that 1,000 Rand plus the 12.47% will be what is reinvested, and that's what's going to be used to calculate the interest earned in the second year. So remember, it includes the interest. That's why compounding is used, and that's what compounding means, that you are reinvesting the initial investment being the 1,000 Rand plus the interest that you have earned, so that you are getting more and more interest as the years go by. So in average, you're earning 12.47%. Okay, so that's for this investment. Now let's look at one more example before we look at how to do the same calculation using Excel. So here's the example. Now what I want you to do here is to pause the video, attempt the example, and see what answer you get, because what I find is that students usually get the wrong answer, not because they didn't plug in the right amounts in the right places, but because they didn't pay careful attention to the brackets and where they should be. So go ahead and calculate it. Once you're done, press continue and you will see the solution. Okay, I hope you're done here. So let's read. A company's revenue is currently 12 million Rand. Already I can tell that is my present value or my beginning value. In 4 years, the revenue is expected to grow to 24 million Rand. Obviously, that's my future value or my ending value. Calculate the compound annual growth rate or CAGR based on these figures. Okay, so let's look at our components here. Firstly, let's bring up our formula. Okay, so here's our solution, the formula, ending value. Easy to pick up here. In 4 years, the revenue is expected to grow to 24 million Rand. Or the graph just told you the value in year 4 is 24 million Rand. Okay, so that's my ending value, 24 million Rand, divided by my starting value, which is 12 million Rand. Okay, so you can see that our examples are quite simplified here. Sometimes you'll be given a scenario in a paragraph or two, and so you just have to sift out what the values are that you need to plug into your formula. But these are the keywords that you're using. If it's the beginning value or the starting value or the ending value or the final value, you know what it means. Ending value would be the final value. So it would be 24 million Rand divided by 12 million Rand. We raise it to the power of 1 divided by, what is my number of periods? 4 years. As you can see here, in 4 years time. And then once we are done with that, we will deduct 1 and we've got our CAGR. So here's what it looks like. 24 million divided by 12 million, raise that to the power of 1 divided by 4. And then my answer, I will deduct 1. So you can see, if you pay attention to the brackets here, even if you're using a simple calculator, you should be able to get the 18.92% as your CAGR for this one. So I hope that was easy enough. Remember, you have to plug in the correct amounts in the correct places and follow the brackets. If it's confusing you, then you can just do one at a time. Just take 24 million divided by 12 million, get that answer, and then you also do 1 divided by 4, get that answer. So it's going to be the answer here to the power of 0.25, which is the 1 divided by 4, and then when I get that answer, I just have to deduct 1 and I will get 18.92%. So on average, year on year, this company's revenue is growing by 18.92%. Now suppose you're looking at two separate companies here. One company is getting revenues for 6 years and not 4, or it's for 3 years and not 4. Then you are able to use the CAGR to gauge which one is a better investment, based of course on the compound annual growth rate. So you can say if the other company is getting 16.2%, then you know that this company's revenue is better than that one, because it's getting 18.92% growth rate year on year. Of course, there are assumptions that it's making, but we'll look at that when we look at the advantages and disadvantages. Now, let's look at these two same examples and calculate them using Excel. It's going to be quite quick to do this. So here we are in Excel. We're going to see how to calculate the compound annual growth rate using Excel. Now, if you see here, I've put 3 ways that you can do this, very simple ways that you can do it using Excel. Of course, these are not the only ways, but these are very easy ways you can calculate the compound annual growth rate using Excel. So we're gonna first look at the manual way, and then the rate formula, and then the power formula, and you'll see how easy it is, and it's going to give us the exact same answer. Of course, I've also brought in our formula here on top, the one that we used to get the answers. But let's look at this. How do we do it manually? Well, we're just going to plug in the formula that we have here at the top. So I'm going to press the equal sign and then open bracket twice. Remember, I have to take into account the number of brackets that we have here. And then what is our ending value? Our ending value is 1,800. Remember that. And then what is our beginning value, or our starting value? That's 1,000 Rand. Okay, and then I close the first bracket, and then I raise it to the power of 1 divided by the number of years, which is 5 years. So I'm going to press the power sign. You can see here it's like an arrow pointing upwards. You'll just have to find it in your keyboard, and you will put that, and then I'm going to open the bracket. Okay, you have to open the bracket here so that you can do the division. Okay, so that's going to be 1 divided by 5. And then I close the bracket. Remember, after you put the power sign, you have to open the bracket and then put the 1 divided by the number of periods, and then you close the bracket. And then once you've done that, you close the bracket again to make sure that everything within these big brackets are calculated first before you deduct 1. So I'm going to minus 1, and then I will click on enter. And you can see here it gives me 12.47%. That's exactly what we wanted. That's what we had gotten earlier. And so you can see how to do that manually using Excel. What about the formula, or the Excel formula specifically? Well, here's how it looks like. We're going to first look at the rate formula. So I'm going to click on equals, and then I will press rate, and then I open my bracket, and then you can see here it's asking me what's the number of periods. Well, I'm going to press 5 because that's the number of periods, 5 years here. And then I press the comma sign. What is the payment? Well, what do they mean by the payments? They mean how much payments am I making every year? Well, here we're not taking that into account. When you're calculating the compound annual growth rate, you don't take payment into account. There's no payment here. So I'm going to press 0 and then comma. What is my present value, or the starting value? I'm going to put that as 1,000, and I'm going to put it as a negative, and I'll explain why just now, but you have to put it as a negative. And then I press comma. It's asking me for future value, or FV, or my ending value. That's 1,800. I'm going to put that as a positive. Now here's where I was putting my present value as a negative. If I put my present value as a positive and my future value as a positive, it's going to be an error. So I have to put either the present value as a positive or my future value as a positive. But what I'm saying is that they have to have different signs. Your present value and your future value cannot have the same signs. They can't all be positive or negative. One has to be a positive, one has to be a negative. So it doesn't matter which one you put as a positive and which one you put as a negative. Okay, that's it. I don't have to continue here. I can just press the closing bracket, and then I press enter. And you can see here it gives me 12%. Of course, I just have to increase the decimals here. So you'll see, if I increase the decimals, you can see it's 12.47% using the rate formula. Now, let's do it with the last formula here, the power formula. I press the equal sign, and then I type power, and then I open my brackets here. And then what is my number? Well, that's going to be my closing value, or my ending value, divided by my starting value. So that's going to be 1,800 divided by 1,000. Okay, and then I press comma. What is the power here? Well, I raise it to the power of 1 divided by 5. Remember, it's 1 divided by the number of periods, as we did with our formula. And then I will close my brackets, and then after I close my brackets, I mustn't forget to deduct 1. Okay, once I've done that, I press enter, and you can see here it's giving me 0.12, which is the same as 12%. I can just change it to show the percentage here, and then increase my decimals, and you can see 12.47%. That's how easy it is using Excel. So if you don't have a financial calculator, or if you don't want to be dealing with the formula, and you are able to use Excel in your calculation, then you can go ahead and use one of these methods that I've just shown. So let's quickly look at the second one using the exact same methods. Manually, I'm going to press equals here, open 2 brackets, and then take my ending value. In this case, it's 24 million. So 24 million, and then divided by my present value, which is my 12 million. Or my starting value, that is. And then I will close bracket, and then raise that to the power of 1 divided by the number of periods. So I'm going to put the power sign here, the arrow pointing up, as you can see, and then I open bracket. 1 divided by how many years were we dealing with here? Well, we're told 4 years, so that's the number of periods here. So 1 divided by 4, close my brackets, and then I close the bracket again to close everything, and then of course I will deduct 1, and then I will press enter, and you can see here it's giving me 0.19. So of course I can just put the percentage sign and then increase my decimals. You can see 18.92%. That's exactly what we had gotten. Now let's use the rate formula. Equals to rate, and then open bracket. The number of periods is 4, and then comma, there's no payment, remember, with the CAGR, so I'm going to put 0, and then comma again, my present value, I'm going to put the 12 million. And then I'm going to make sure I put it as a negative. Remember, you can either put your present value or your future value as a negative. Okay, one of them has to be a positive and one a negative. And then comma again, my future value is 24 million. So I'm going to put 24 million. Okay, and then I'm going to close my brackets and press enter. You can see 19%. If I increase my decimals here, 18.92%. Now let's do that again with the power formula. So equals to power, and then open bracket. The number here is my future value, 24 million, divided by my present value, the starting value, 12 million. And then I press the comma sign. What do I raise it to? Well, the power of 1 divided by 4. So I'm going to just put 1 divided by 4. And then I'm going to close my bracket and then deduct 1 and press enter. You can see the same thing. Put my percentage sign, and then I increase my decimal. I've got 18.92%. Hope that was easy enough. Hope you're able to do it using the formula manually and using the same formula in Excel, as well as using the Excel formulas itself. So you can choose which one is easiest for you, which one is faster for you, and get used to it, and you can do it faster. Alternatively, you can learn 1 or 2 of the formulas so that you can do a sanity check once you've done your calculation to make sure you've gotten everything correctly. Now, what are the advantages and the disadvantages of CAGR? Well, let's end with that. Let's look at the advantages and the disadvantages. So here are the advantages and the disadvantages of CAGR. What are the advantages? Well, here's the first one: simplicity. It provides a straightforward way to understand the growth rate over time. As you would have seen, you just have to do the calculation, especially if you're doing a comparison. You're able to simply calculate it using that formula and analyze it, of course, saying which one is better based on the CAGR. So it's quite straightforward to do. So that's the first advantage. The second one we have here is comparability. I've just mentioned this, and that is where it ties in with simplicity. It's a simple formula. You calculate it, useful for comparing different investments or metrics with varying growth patterns. And so if you've got different investments or different companies with different revenues in different amount of periods, then you're able to use the CAGR gauge for the two companies. And as I mentioned when we were looking at the example, whichever one is higher is likely the one that you would consider if you're only going purely on the CAGR. Remember, there are other metrics that you can use and are usually used as well in addition to the CAGR. So most of the advantages of the CAGR is really tying into these two. There are actually more advantages to the CAGR, but you will find that it really speaks into what these two have already spoken into: simplicity and comparability. You're able to compare with other entities, other investments, other industries as well. Okay, what are the disadvantages of the CAGR? Well, let's quickly look at them. The first one here is that it ignores volatility. CAGR does not account for the volatility or fluctuations within the periods in question. What does that mean? Well, remember, as I mentioned at the beginning, when you are calculating using CAGR, so let's look at the example where you have revenue, for instance, where it grew from 12 million rand to 24 million rand in 4 years. But what the CAGR does not take into account is what happened between year 1 and year 3. Okay, so we know that currently it's got 12 million rand and it's expected, or it grew to 24 million rand in year 4. But what happened between year 1 to year 3? Did the revenue drop? Did it go to 1 million rand in the following year, and then it went to 40 million rand in the next year, and then it dropped to 24 million rand finally in the final year? The CAGR does not take that into account. The CAGR does assume that it grew at a steady pace for the duration of the periods. I hope that has made sense with the explanation of the volatility here that the CAGR does not take into account. Okay, so the second one, assumption of reinvestment. It assumes that profits are reinvested, which might not always be the case. And so with the CAGR, remember what I mentioned with compounding as well, that it assumes that the money that you've made this year, you're reinvesting it with its interest, if you will, or with its growth, and it will reinvest it for the following year, and it will do so again until the end of the periods. That's the assumption that it makes, but that's not always the case. So these are the advantages and the disadvantages of the CAGR. There might be more that you can think of, but these are the main ones that would come up. Other advantages and disadvantages would really tie up into what we've mentioned here. Now, I hope this lesson has made sense. I hope you've gained value here. I hope you're able to define what the CAGR is. You're able to do the calculation using the formula, using Excel, and you're also able to explain what are the advantages and the disadvantages of CAGR and why you shouldn't use it in isolation in practice. If you have indeed gained value, consider subscribing to our channel, like this video, and share it to those you think it might help. Till next time, cheers.